The exam room smells like old paper and the specific kind of silence that comes from people trying not to laugh. Dale Vaughan sits at the calibration console, both palms flat on the sight reader's glass plate, and waits. The reader is a Bureau standard unit, matte gray, the size of a briefcase, a display panel mounted at eye level so the examiner and the candidate see the number at the same moment. Around him, 12 other candidates have already been scored and dismissed. Their numbers ranged from a low of 31 to a high of 114. The Bureau's threshold for a field license is 40. Most people who make it through the application process score somewhere between 60 and 90. Dale has been a Spirit Bureau applicant for 9 months. Before that, he spent 3 years doing unlicensed observer work in Wraith City's lower transit zones, where the Spirit bleed-through is worst. Writing field notes, mapping activity patterns, learning every classification in the Bureau's public taxonomy, reading every published study on resonance channel mechanics that the Bureau's research division had ever released to open archive. He knows what the sight reader is measuring: spectral resonance frequency, the narrow band of perception that separates a licensed hunter from an ordinary civilian. The reader assigns a composite score based on how strongly a candidate's resonance channel aligns with the standard detection band. That number is everything. Below 40, you don't get a license. Below 20, the Bureau considers you a standard civilian. Below 10, you shouldn't have passed the preliminary screening. He knows the scoring system. He knows what the number means. He knows that he has spent 3 years earning the right to sit here and find out what his number is. The reader's display flickers. Numbers scroll. They settle. 0. The room goes quiet in a specific way, the way it goes quiet when something has broken. The examiner, a Bureau standard agent named Farron, stares at the display for a long moment. Then she looks at Dale, then at the display again. "Run it again," Director Callus Wren says from the observation window. He's present today because the Bureau's annual certification intake is a formal event. 12 candidates, 1 room, the director watching through glass to confirm process integrity. He's in his Bureau coat, chest insignia polished, expression relaxed. That expression changes now to something that hasn't quite decided if it's confused or amused. Farron runs it again. The reader rescans. The display scrolls. 0. "One more time," Wren says. Something has entered his voice. They run it 3 times. Every number is the same. The reader's readout isn't broken. The other 12 candidate scores are logged and valid in the system. The unit's own diagnostic is green. The calibration date is current. The problem is not the machine. The problem, apparently, is Dale Vaughan. Wren comes into the room. He's a tall man, broad across the shoulders, 30 years in the Bureau, and every one of them visible in his face. He looks at Dale the way a man looks at a floor that has given way without warning. "You scored 0, Wren says. "Not 23, not 11, 0. The reader isn't detecting a spectral resonance channel at all. This would mean you have less sight than a standard civilian with no training. This would mean you have, functionally, no ability to perceive spirits whatsoever." He pauses. "Have you been in contact with any resonance-suppressing compounds? Medication? Void zone exposure above recommended limits?" "No," Dale says. "Any previous injuries to your spectral channels that may not have been recorded?" "No." Wren looks at the display one more time. Then, slowly, something shifts in his expression, and what settles there is not confusion. It is amusement. Not the small, private kind. The kind a man allows himself when he is certain that what he is about to say is appropriate, and that the room will agree with him. "Son," Wren says, "the Bureau thanks you for your application. We will not be proceeding with your certification." He turns back to the observation window. "Someone get Orvin in here. He'll want to see this." The door opens 2 minutes later. Orvin Drake is the Bureau's top-ranked spirit hunter in Wraith City, Tier 7 certified, holder of the current field record for most single-session spirit clearances in a calendar year, the face the Bureau uses in public communications when it wants to convey competence. He's younger than Wren, lean, with the easy posture of a man who has never walked into a room that didn't already belong to him. He looks at the display. He reads it. Then he laughs. Not cruelly, or not only cruelly. The laugh of a man who cannot help it, the reflex of someone confronted with something genuinely absurd. 0, Orvin says. He shakes his head. Technically impressive in the wrong direction. He looks at Dale with something that is almost pity and entirely dismissal. You've been applying to this bureau for 9 months. What did you think you were going to do here? Dale stands up from the reader. He picks up his bag. He looks at the display one last time. 0. And then at Ren, and then at Orvin, and he says nothing, because there is nothing to say that would matter in this room. His license application is rejected at 11:24 a.m. His inert status, the Bureau's designation for a candidate who has failed certification, is logged in the public registry by noon. By 3 p.m., the intake board at Bureau headquarters has a copy of the reader printout tacked to it. Someone has written 0 across the top in red marker, and the agents who pass it on the way to the coffee station slow down to read it, then glance at each other. The Blind Hunter. It becomes his name in the Bureau within a week. Dale Vorn goes home to his apartment in Veyrath's Greymore district and sits at his desk and does not sleep. He spent 9 months preparing, 3 years before that watching. He has every spirit classification memorized, every behavioral pattern in the Bureau's taxonomy, cross-referenced in his field notes, every resonance mechanic from the research archives written out in his own hand until it sat in his memory as naturally as the street grid of Veyrath. He has watched licensed hunters work, watched the way they orient toward a spirit presence, the small flicker of attention that marks the moment of detection, the micro-adjustments they make when a spirit changes frequency. He has understood all of it. He has spent 3 years being certain that he could do what they do. He sits at the desk for 3 hours. Then he picks up his field notebook, puts it in his bag, and goes to the Greymore Transit Zone. The Greymore Transit Zone has had an active spirit bleed-through report filed with the Bureau for 6 weeks and no clearance team assigned yet, because Greymore is low priority and the Bureau's field schedule is backlogged. Dale has read the report 3 times. He knows the site layout, the logged entity count, the estimated clearance difficulty. He has absolutely no legitimate reason to be there, no license to use, no technique to apply, no Bureau sanction of any kind. He walks in anyway. He walks into the Greymore Transit Zone at 10 past midnight, unlicensed, inert on the registry, carrying nothing but a field notebook and a flashlight. And the spirits move out of his way. He doesn't process it immediately. The transit zone is a long underground corridor, 300 meters from entrance to the active bleed-through site at the far end, and as he walks, the air changes. The specific change that spirit zones produce, a drop in temperature, a slight pressure shift, the feeling of a room that has not been opened in a long time. He's felt this before, on every unauthorized observation run he's done over the past 3 years. He knows this feeling. He has mapped it in a dozen locations and logged its variants by zone type and entity class. What he has never felt is what happens next. The wisps, low-frequency spirits, Class 1, essentially harmless, attracted to resonance channels in the same way moths are attracted to light, appear in the peripheral zones at the tunnel's edges. There are 7 of them. A licensed hunter would be tracking their movement, managing distance, ready to use a standard sight channel pulse to disperse them if they cluster. Dale has no sight channel. According to the Bureau's reader, he has no spectral resonance at all. The wisps drift toward him. Then they stop. Then, one by one, they drift back to the walls. Not the way spirits drift when a licensed hunter approaches with a pulse ready. That's displacement, the spectral equivalent of an animal startled by a sound. This is something else. They stop moving. They become still, and in the stillness, there is something in how they face him that Dale, watching, cannot immediately name. It is not fear. It is not avoidance. It is not the neutral drift of an entity moving away from interference. He holds his flashlight steady and watches them for 60 seconds, making notes. Then he walks on. The bleed-through site at the far end is a collapsed station maintenance room, sealed for 40 years, where 4 Class 2 shade drifters have been logged by the Bureau's perimeter scanner. The Bureau report estimates 2 to 3 hours for a standard Tier 2 hunter to clear the site. Dale walks in. The shade drifters turn, and then they're still. The room is silent for a long time. Dale stands in the center of it, field notebook open, flashlight held at his side, and watches 4 Class 2 spirits that should be agitated by his presence simply wait. One of them, and he will not be able to explain this for weeks, not even to himself, lowers its form toward the ground in a posture that is nothing like flight and nothing like aggression. It looks to Dale like submission. He writes it all down, every detail. The behavior, the timing, the sequence, the fact that none of the 4 entities made any movement toward him, the way the nearest one lowered itself, the way the room felt, which was not threatening, not hostile, not the pressured atmosphere that Bureau field reports always describe when agents enter active entity zones. It felt the way a room feels when everything in it is waiting for instruction from something that outranks it. He has no framework for this yet. He writes it down anyway and goes home. He files the bleed-through clearance as an anonymous tip to the Bureau's public portal. No name, no license number, just a GPS pin and a note that reads, "Site resolved, no active spirits present." He goes home and sleeps for 5 hours. In the morning he makes coffee and reads his notes from the night before, and then adds 3 paragraphs of analysis that he crosses out and rewrites twice. The next night he does it again. The second site is a residential basement in Greymoor's North Sector, logged with 2 Class 2 shade drifters and a Class 3 hollow, a rarer type, associated with locations where violent events have left a strong residual frequency. The Bureau's case file on the hollow notes that it has resisted 2 clearance attempts, the second involving a Tier 3 senior agent who spent 4 hours in the site and logged it as entity non-cooperative. The agent's supplementary note, which is more honest than most supplementary notes, adds, "Did not feel afraid. Felt assessed. Recommend reassignment to experienced senior team." The case file has been sitting with that note on it for 3 months. Dale reads that note twice. He writes the word assessed in the margin of his own notebook with a question mark. The basement is reached through a door in the building's utility corridor, down a half flight of stairs, into a space that was originally built for storage and has accumulated the specific quality that spaces accumulate when something has been in them for a long time. A density, a sense that the air has weight it didn't start with. The 2 Class 2 entities go still immediately, same as in the transit zone. He's already familiar with the shape of it, the way a drifter's constant low-level ambient drift simply stops, the way the cessation is so clean and total that it's more noticeable than movement would have been. He notes the time. The hollow is different. It doesn't stop when he enters. It's a different quality of entity than anything he has encountered so far. Older, more anchored, with a presence that sits in the space not like a disturbance but like a weight. A Class 3 hollow is associated with locations of strong residual frequency, which is the Bureau's careful taxonomic language for somewhere something severe happened and didn't fully leave. This one is in a basement that the building records show was sealed 40 years ago after a fire in the floor above. Dale doesn't know what happened in the building before the fire. He knows what is here now. It doesn't stop moving when he enters. It turns toward him, and then it tracks him as he moves through the space, not aggressively, not the escalating pursuit behavior that Bureau agents log when an entity is provoked, but with a consistent and total orientation, the way something keeps its attention on a point of interest. For 20 minutes it maintains that tracking as he walks the perimeter of the basement and takes notes and watches it watch him. He writes, "The hollow is evaluating." Not the way an aggressive entity evaluates a threat, not the way a prey animal evaluates a predator. The way something evaluates something it hasn't seen before and is trying to place in a category it doesn't have yet. The Tier 3 agent was right, assessed. He stops moving and stands still, which is when the evaluation seems to change. When he was moving, the hollow was tracking a moving object. When he stops, something else happens. Its orientation doesn't change, but the quality of it does. from tracking to attending, from movement following to stillness recognizing. He has the sense, standing in the sealed basement of a building in Greymore at 1 in the morning, that the hollow is arriving at a conclusion. Not to the ground, not fully, but its form compresses, a reduction in the height it occupies in the space, a change in the way its presence fills the room, a shift from the dense upper space posture that Class 3 entities hold by default to something lower and smaller and oriented differently, oriented downward. The Bureau's classification notes describe this posture in a footnote to the Sovereign class encounter records, a footnote that Dale has read so many times he can reproduce it from memory. Historical accounts describe voluntary compression as a posture of deference observed only in the presence of entities or individuals of significantly higher classification. The footnote cites one case, one documented instance, from 83 years ago, involving a hunter whose classification notes have been partially redacted. He writes it down. He writes it down as carefully and completely as he can, because he is fairly certain he is looking at something that has not been observed in the Bureau's active history. Then he files the anonymous tip and goes home. Then he files the anonymous tip and goes home. Over the next 3 weeks, he works through Greymore's backlog. He doesn't rush. Each site gets logged in full detail. The entity behavior on approach, the time to stillness, the posture at the moment of submission, the quality of the clearance. The entities don't vanish when he leaves the way Bureau-dispatched entities vanish. Dispersed, frequency broken, rendered inert. They resolve. There's a difference, and he notes it carefully. A dispersed entity is a frequency pattern that has been disrupted. A resolved entity has done something voluntary. The Greymore backlog, 11 sites, drops to 0. The anonymous tips stop going unremarked in the 4th week. The Bureau's public portal is monitored by a junior processing agent, a woman named Tessely, who handles intake for the Greymore sector and has been watching the tick-down on the backlog with increasing confusion. 7 clearances in 3 weeks. No field team assigned. No licensed hunter has logged Greymore hours in 2 months. She flags it to her supervisor, who flags it up the chain, and eventually the flag reaches Director Wren. Wren looks at the GPS pins. He looks at the dates. He pulls up the active case files for each location and notes that every one has been subsequently confirmed as cleared. Bureau field agents sent for verification found 0 spirit activity at every site. Someone is doing unlicensed clearance work in Greymore, his deputy tells him. Send a team to document the next one, Wren says. The team waits at the boundary of the 8th listed location, a flooded underpass where a Tier 3 Class 4 Merc is logged active, for 2 hours. At 1:17 a.m., a man in a dark coat with white-silver hair walks past them into the site. They log his face. They check the registry. Dale Vorn. Status. Inert. They watch the monitoring feed. The Merc's signature, visible on their site scanners, a rolling displacement pattern that takes Tier 3 training to track. Spikes when Dale enters, which is what they expect. Entity agitation on approach. Standard. They wait for the escalation to follow. It doesn't follow. The spike holds for 40 seconds, then flattens. The displacement pattern doesn't shift into the irregular burst cycling that signals a suppressed entity, or the slow fade of a dispersed one. It simply levels, then drops, smoothly, like something that has finished adjusting. 12 minutes after Dale walks in, the scanner shows 0 activity. Dale walks out. He sees the team. He stops. The team's lead agent, a Tier 2 licensed hunter named Adron Cass, steps forward. Mr. Vorn, the Bureau would like to speak with you. Dale looks at him for a moment. Is that an order? It's a request. Dale nods. He follows them. The meeting takes place in a Bureau conference room at 2 a.m. with Cass, his supervisor, and, after a 20-minute delay that suggests an emergency call, Director Callus Wren himself. Wren sits across the table from Dale and puts the monitoring feed report between them. The Merc in the underpass, Wren says. Tier 3 classification. Walk me through what you used. I walked in, Dale says. I waited. It stopped. Ren stares at him. You waited. Yes. You used no technique, no pulse, no field tool of any kind. No. You have no license. Your registry status is inert, which means according to the Bureau's own records, you have no detectable spectral resonance capacity whatsoever. Ren stops. And a Class 4 Merc stopped on its own, in your presence. It stopped, Dale says. I don't think it was on its own. Ren looks at the report. He looks at Dale. He looks at the report again. There is something in his face that might, in a different man, manifest as a frown. In Ren it manifests as a very controlled stillness. I'm going to need you to submit to a secondary calibration, he says. A different reader. Bureau Headquarters Unit. Not an intake model. All right, Dale says. They run the Bureau's headquarters reader on him at 3 a.m. The headquarters unit is a research-grade model, more sensitive than the intake reader, capable of detecting fractional spectral resonance values and mapping their frequency distribution across the full known spectrum, not just assigning a single composite score based on the standard detection band. 4 Bureau technicians operate it. Ren watches through glass. The scan takes 11 minutes, which is 9 minutes longer than a standard scan. During those 11 minutes, 2 of the 4 technicians exchange looks at least 3 times. The readout is building on their screens as it scans, and it is not building the way readouts build. When it finishes, one of the technicians looks at the readout, then she looks at her colleague, then she turns to the observation window. Director, she says, we need you to come look at this. The readout shows Dale's resonance channel map. A standard resonance map looks like a narrow beam, one frequency band, the spectral perception range that the Bureau's classification system is built around. Narrower bands mean lower scores. Broader bands mean higher scores. The highest-ranked hunters have bands roughly 3 to 4 times wider than the baseline. Dale's resonance map is not a band. It is a field. It covers every frequency on the spectrum, from the lowest Class 1 wisp detection range to ranges that the scanner registers as valid signal but has no existing label for, ranges that extend above the top of the Bureau's entire classification system. Not a spike at the standard detection band, not a wide band, a continuous field, wall-to-wall across every frequency, with the strongest concentration in ranges the Bureau's system has never assigned hunter perception capacity to. The intake reader scored him 0, the technician says, and her voice has the careful quality of someone presenting findings she has checked twice. Because it's a single-frequency scanner, it measures resonance in the standard hunter detection band. His resonance doesn't exist in the standard hunter detection band. It exists everywhere around it, above it, below it, through it. The single-frequency scanner detected nothing because there was nothing in the band it was looking for. She pauses. He wasn't reading as 0 because he has no sight. He was reading as 0 because the reader didn't have a scale that includes what he has. Ren looks at the map for a long time. Nobody speaks. What does it mean? He asks. Practically, what does a full-spectrum resonance field do to entity interaction? The technician hesitates. These are uncharted waters. The Bureau's entire understanding of hunter-entity dynamics is built on the single-frequency model. I can only theorize from what the data shows, but if I had to characterize it, every spirit we classify operates on a specific frequency range. A licensed hunter's sight channel lets them perceive and interact with spirits in that range. A full-spectrum field wouldn't have a range. It would perceive all of them simultaneously, at all classification tiers, without distinction. And if the field is strong enough, which based on these readings it is, by a factor that I don't have a comparison metric for, it would be perceptible to spirits as well. Not the way a hunter's channel is perceptible. Something much stronger. Something a spirit would feel before the hunter walked into the room. Ren looks at her. Like what? She looks at the readout again. She is quiet for a moment, choosing the right word. Like what they feel when something outranks them. The notification appears on Dale's personal registry entry at 4:07 a.m., visible only to him, a floating line of text that surfaces in his peripheral vision as he stands in the corridor outside the scan room. Bureau format, but unlike any Bureau notification he has ever seen, because the Bureau's system does not have a classification called sovereign void and does not use the designation above site, and has never, in its operational history, assigned a hunter the status unclassifiable. He reads it twice. Then he puts his notebook away and goes home. He does not go back to the anonymous tips that week. He sits with his field notes and the scan report that the technician printed for him. She printed it without being asked. She handed it to him in the hallway with the quiet expression of someone who has just measured something she doesn't have a unit for, and he reads it until he understands what he is looking at. The part he keeps returning to is not the sovereign void designation or the above-site classification or even the full spectrum map with its continuous field across every frequency. Those are facts he accepts because the data says they are true. The part he keeps returning to is the technician's phrase, what they feel when something outranks them. He has been watching the spirits submit for 3 weeks. He has mapped the behavior, logged the timing, noted the posture. He has been treating it as data, accurate data, carefully collected, but data about something external, spirit behavior, entity response patterns, not something about him. What the technician's phrase does is close the distance. The spirits are not responding to a frequency they can use, the way they respond to a licensed hunter's site channel. They are responding to something they recognize as above their classification. They are responding the way anything responds when it encounters something at the top of the scale. He sits with this for a long time in his apartment in Graymore, while the city outside does what cities do in the hours before dawn. He is not a man given to dramatic reckonings. But this is the information that everything before it was leading toward, and he lets himself understand it completely. He has never been the blind hunter. He has always been something for which the Bureau has not had a name, doing something that the Bureau has not had a framework for, and the reader's zero was not a failure. It was the most accurate thing the reader was capable of saying, which was that its scale did not include what he is. He makes coffee. He opens the Bureau's public active case list. He has work to do. The Bureau's active clearance backlog for Veyrath City runs to 43 open cases. The list is publicly accessible, part of the Bureau's transparency protocol, updated every Monday, listing every active site by location, entity classification, case age, and priority tier. Dale has read it many times before. He reads it again now with a different frame. He picks the oldest cases, not the highest tier ones, the oldest. The cases where the file shows multiple assigned teams and a series of inconclusive results, and a final status of active, ongoing, which is the Bureau's designation for a case that has not been closed because no one has figured out how to close it. The oldest open case on the public list that isn't classified as non-clearable is the Halvern Rail Station, a decommissioned transit hub on the city's south side, closed to the public for 14 years, 7 teams assigned across that span with 0 clearance result. Classification: Tier 4 multi-entity site, 11 active entities ranging from Class 2 to Class 5. The last field team's report is a single-paragraph summary that ends with, "Recommend indefinite monitoring, clearance not feasible with current Bureau staffing and resource allocation." Dale goes there on a Thursday night. He walks through the main hall of the Halvern Rail Station, and he doesn't hurry, because he has learned by now that there is no advantage to hurrying. The entities need to register his presence before they respond to it, and that takes whatever time it takes. Different for different classifications, different for entities that have been anchored to a location for a long time versus newer manifestations, different for the ones that have had multiple hunter encounters versus the ones that have been left alone for years. The Class 2 drifters are the first to go still, then the Class 3 entities in the side corridors, the Class 4 cluster near the old ticketing hall, 4 of them, the type that Bureau field reports consistently rate as requiring coordinated 2-agent suppression, settle within 15 minutes of his approach, which is faster than he expected, and he notes in his field book that time to stillness seems to decrease as the entity's tier increases. As if higher class entities recognize what he is more quickly, as if the recognition is cleaner at higher frequencies. The Class 5 hollow anchor, the entity anchored to the station's main arrival platform, the one flagged in the case file as the primary clearance obstacle, is the last. A Class 5 is not something a standard hunter walks up to. The case file's most recent team report describes it as massive presence, immovable, suppression attempts resulted in counter-escalation, 3 agents with fractured resonance channels, extraction required. That was 8 months ago. The Class 5 has been on the platform since then, and the Bureau has left it there because the alternative is sending another team in to fail. Dale walks to 30 meters. He stops. He waits. The Class 5 hollow anchor turns. It is facing him fully now, all of its presence, which is substantial, oriented in his direction. He holds still. He keeps his flashlight at his side and his notebook open, and he watches it. It watches him. The monitoring equipment at the Bureau's perimeter station 200 meters up at street level is logging the entity's signature in real time, and if Dale could see that readout, he would see the signature doing something the Bureau's logs have no category for. It is not spiking, not cycling, not the agitation then escalation pattern that a licensed hunter's approach generates. It is holding perfectly level, as if the entity has paused every element of its normal ambient behavior and directed everything it has toward what is standing 30 meters away from it. 2 minutes. 5. The platform is silent. The old sound of a large enclosed space, the echo of stone and neglected air, the particular quality of a structure that has not meaningfully changed in 14 years except to deepen. At the 8-minute mark, the Class 5 hollow anchor does something that no Class 5 entity in the Bureau's field record has ever done when a hunter approaches it unshielded. It kneels. Not the partial compression he saw from the hollow in Graymore. Full. The entity's presence compresses toward the platform, its entire form oriented downward, in the posture that the Bureau's historical records describe in exactly 2 documented cases, both involving sovereign-class encounters from over a century ago, neither of which the Bureau's current agents have ever seen in the field because there have been no sovereign-class encounters in living Bureau memory. He writes it down, every detail. Then he walks back out, pulls up the Bureau's public portal, and files, Halvern Rail Station, active site, resolved. No entities present. The Bureau's verification team arrives at 7 a.m. They scan the station for 3 hours. They find nothing. The case file gets the closed stamp for the first time in 14 years. The agent who processes it stares at the portal entry for a long moment. There is no hunter name attached. There is no license number. The methodology field, which Bureau protocol requires teams to fill in, reads, walked through, waited. The agent flagging it to her supervisor writes in the escalation note, unknown actor, no license technique, no traceable resonance signature on-site entry or exit scans. Second such case from the same actor in 7 days. The Halvern Rail Station has been an active priority case since before I joined this Bureau. It is now closed. The case number has been on this list for 14 years. I want to know who did this. The case gets escalated to Wren's desk by 9 a.m., and Dale keeps going. The Bureau's active backlog drops to 22, then 18, then 15 as Dale works through it. 2 cases per week, always alone, always the hard ones, always leaving the anonymous tip after. The verification teams that follow up keep coming back with the same finding. 0 activity, cleared, no methodology on record, case closed. Agents start talking. In the hallways, in the end-of-shift debriefs, in the quiet conversations that happen when Tessely updates the public backlog, and someone notices that 4 cases that were flagged as multi-year ongoing have flipped to closed since Tuesday. Someone surfaces the INERT printout from the intake board, the one with 0 in red marker, and puts it next to the list of closed cases, and the thing that results is not exactly silence and not exactly noise. It is the specific atmosphere of a professional body encountering data that doesn't fit its model. Orvin Drake reads the updated field reports on a Thursday between assignments. He is on a 2-week Tier 5 clearance in the commercial district, a high-profile operation, the kind that gets Bureau press releases. And between sessions he gets the case summary reports from his deputy and reads through the backlog updates. He reads the Halvern rail station closure. He reads the anonymous tips methodology field. He reads the scan report that Wren forwarded him a week ago, with the full spectrum resonance map and the technician's notes. Then he sits with the file for a long time. He is not a man given to easy revision of his judgments. He built his position in this bureau on the soundness of his assessments, and his assessment on the day of the certification intake, the blind hunter, 0, what did you think you were going to do here, was made in good faith from the data available. He knows this. He also knows that good faith assessments from incomplete data are still wrong. He goes to see Wren. He's closing the hard cases, Orvin says, the ones my teams haven't been able to close. Yes, Wren says. What's left on the backlog? Wren is quiet for a moment. He has been quiet about this for a week, not in the sense of avoiding it, but in the sense of a man who keeps circling back to the same fact and finding it no easier to say each time. The Grand Crypt, he says. The Grand Crypt. 11 years. The Bureau's worst open case. The file that gets cited in City Council budget meetings every cycle as the standing evidence that the Bureau's resources are insufficient for Vyrath's hardest sites. A historic burial complex on the city's eastern ridge, sealed to the public, with a perimeter resonance signature so severe that the Bureau's monitoring equipment reads in ranges associated with catastrophic bleed-through events. 7 teams over 11 years. No clearance. The last assigned team made it to level 3 of a 5-level structure before the entity's presence became too severe to continue, and their field report included the phrase, "Entity classification likely exceeds current Bureau taxonomy." That was 2 years ago. The Bureau has not sent a team since. The entity classification. Dale finds the Grand Crypt's case file in the public registry on a Sunday afternoon and reads every page of it. The first monitoring reports, the early team attempts, the escalating difficulty assessments, the eventual declaration of non-clearable status. He reads the entity classification notes, which are tentative because no team has gotten close enough to confirm. The working classification is Class 8, a Wraith-Sovereign, the rarest designation in the Bureau's taxonomy, fewer than a dozen confirmed cases in the organization's entire operational history, only one of which resulted in a successful clearance, and that clearance took a 5-agent Tier 7 team 6 weeks to achieve and put 2 of them in recovery for 3 months. Dale reads the City Council meeting minutes. He reads the cost projections for indefinite monitoring. He reads the recommendation from the Bureau's senior counsel from 8 months ago. Maintain perimeter monitoring. Do not commit field resources to clearance attempts until new methodology is developed or Bureau tier capacity increases. Then he closes the file and packs his bag. He goes to the Grand Crypt on Monday night, because Monday nights are when the Bureau's perimeter monitoring rotation shifts, and the overlap period has a 10-minute gap in the active surveillance log that the Monday monitoring agents always cover by showing up early. He knows this because he has read the monitoring reports. The perimeter monitoring station is staffed by 2 Bureau agents on rotating overnight duty. They have instructions to log any unauthorized approach and to prevent civilian access. They do not have instructions for what to do when the person approaching has been logged in their system as inert and has since closed 15 of their Bureau's hardest open cases without a single licensed technique on record. Dale walks up to the perimeter at 11 p.m. The monitoring agent steps forward. "I'm going in," Dale says. "You don't have a license." "No, I don't." He looks at the agent evenly. "Call Director Wren. Tell him I'm here, then step aside." He waits. The agent calls. Wren, at his home, wakes up and answers his Bureau line at 11:08 p.m. and listens for a moment. He looks at his ceiling for 2 seconds. Then he says, in a voice that is not quite steady, "Don't stop him." The Grand Crypt is a deep structure. A carved stone complex built 4 centuries ago, descended 5 levels below the eastern ridge, sealed in the 17th century and reclassified as a restricted zone when the Bureau was founded and Vyrath's spirit activity began to intensify. The architecture is old enough that the carvings in the walls have the stylized quality of a different era, not decorative, not commemorative. Functional, ceiling marks, the kind that were used in the pre-Bureau period when there were no licensed hunters, and the methods for containing spirits were older and rougher and based on entirely different principles. He takes the stairs carefully. The air changes with each level in a way that he has no precise language for. Not cold exactly, not heavy exactly, but both of those things and something additional, something that is not a physical sensation, but that his full-spectrum resonance field registers as presence, the way eyes register light. By level 3, where the Bureau's last team turned back, the presence is substantial enough that he can feel it on every frequency simultaneously, a deep and ancient and immense signature that fills the structure from the bottom up. He keeps going. Level 4. Level 5. The main chamber is at the bottom. It is large, larger than the structural footprint above it, which means it was cut into the ridge bedrock during the original construction, not formed by the building above. Stone ceiling, stone walls, old light from the flashlight catching carved marks that cover every surface. And in the center of the chamber, in the space where the construction's geometry creates a natural focal point, the Wraith-Sovereign. He has read the classification notes. He has read the 2 historical confirmed cases and the 1 clearance account, and every secondary reference the Bureau's archive has. None of it prepared him for the reality of a Class 8 entity in an enclosed space. Because the thing that is not in the classification notes, the thing that cannot be conveyed by frequency readings on a scanner report or behavioral descriptors in a field log, is the quality of the presence. It is not threatening, it is not aggressive. It is simply vast. An entity that has been here for 4 centuries, that has accumulated that duration's worth of frequency and resonance and whatever it is that spirits accumulate over time, and the accumulated weight of it is something you feel not in your body but in the part of you that recognizes the scale of things. He feels it looking at him. He stands still. The Wraith-Sovereign does not advance. It does not signal the counter-escalation that the last Bureau team reported. It holds its position in the center of the chamber, and it is still in the way that something becomes still when it is, and here, in the main chamber of the Grand Crypt, with the word available to him at last, attending. It is attending to him, all of it, everything it is, focused on what he is. And what he is, he understands now, standing in the oldest and most sealed room in Veyrath City, in front of the highest-tier entity the Bureau has ever logged, is something that exists above the top of the taxonomy, something that all of them can feel in the same instant, at every frequency, simultaneously, the way they feel something that outranks them. He sits down on the floor of the main chamber. The Wraith-Sovereign descends, slowly, from its position in the chamber's upper space, where ancient entities naturally position themselves in enclosed structures. It moves downward, and Dale watches it come, and it kneels in front of him. Not the partial compression of a Class 5, full, the complete posture of something vast and ancient and sovereign, acknowledging something vaster. He writes it down. He sits in the Grand Crypt with the most powerful entity ever recorded in Veyrath Bureau history for another 3 hours. He writes 23 pages of notes. He maps the entity's frequency signature in the way that his perception allows, which is differently from any scanner on record. And what he maps is not a contained or suppressed entity, but a patient one, something that has been waiting, not in distress, not in anger, waiting the way something waits when it has been here longer than anything else and is simply present, and has finally, after 400 years, encountered the one thing that could understand what it is. At 3 a.m. he stands up. The Wraith-Sovereign rises with him. "You can go," he says, because it seems like the right thing to say. The entity's presence shifts. Not the rupture of dispersal, nothing like the blunt frequency breaking of Bureau suppression techniques. A resolution, a long tension arriving at its conclusion. The frequency clears, level by level, moving upward through the structure as the Wraith-Sovereign's presence retracts. Not extinguished but released, the way something held in one place for 4 centuries finally moves on. By 3:15 a.m., the Grand Crypt is, for the first time in 11 years, silent. Dale walks out. He files the anonymous tip at 3:31 a.m. from the perimeter monitoring station while the 2 duty agents watch him type. Grand Crypt. Resolved. No entities present. He walks back to the transit line and goes home. Director Callus Wren arrives at the Grand Crypt perimeter at 6 a.m. with a verification team of 6. Orvin Drake is with him. The monitoring equipment at the perimeter reads baseline, not suppressed baseline, not temporarily dampened baseline, clean, the way a zone reads when there is nothing present. They descend, carefully. Full Tier 6 precaution protocol for the first 3 levels, even with the perimeter readings at 0. The Bureau did not get to be a professional body by abandoning procedure when the data was surprising. Level 1, nothing. Level 2, nothing. Level 3, the level where the last team turned back, nothing. Level 4, Level 5, they enter the main chamber. It is empty, not dormant empty, not suppressed empty, the kind of empty that a room is when the thing that was in it has left, the carving on the walls. The stone ceiling, the old architecture of a place that was built for containment and has for the first time in 4 centuries nothing to contain. Orvin Drake runs his own personal resonance scan. He has the strongest individual sight channel in the Bureau. The scan returns 0 activity. He runs it again, 0. He stands in the center of the chamber where a Class 8 Wraith-Sovereign was logged as permanent and non-clearable 2 years ago, and he looks at his scanner, and then he puts his scanner away. He resolved it, one of the verification agents says. Yes, Wren says. How? Wren doesn't answer that. He goes back up to Level 1, and then to the surface, and he calls the monitoring agents from the previous night and asks them what they observed, and they tell him the same thing the portal tip says. Dale Vorn walked in at 11 p.m. At approximately 3:15 a.m., the perimeter monitoring equipment dropped to baseline. Vorn filed the tip at 3:31 a.m. and left. Wren calls his deputy. Find Vorn. Tell him Director Wren is requesting a meeting. Formal meeting. Bureau headquarters. He pauses. Tell him it's a request. Dale gets the call at 10 a.m. He says he'll be there at 2 p.m. He hangs up and makes coffee and finishes his field notes from the Grand Crypt. The Bureau headquarters building is a 10-minute walk from his apartment. He's been there before, for the certification intake, for the 3 a.m. scan, for the conference room meeting after the Graymore footage. He walks in through the main entrance at 1:58 p.m. The security desk agent looks up, looks at him, and looks back at his screen without stopping him. There is a note on the entry log for today. Vorn, wave through, the second-floor conference room. He sits down. They come in 3 minutes later. Wren, his deputy, Orvin Drake, and 2 Bureau Council members who are present because this meeting has been logged as a formal record-keeping event. On the table between them, the Grand Crypt case file, all 11 years of it, the verification team's report from this morning, the Halvern rail station clearance, the full backlog list with Dale's closed cases marked, and the research-grade scan report, the one with the full-spectrum resonance map and the technician's notes. Wren opens the Grand Crypt file and puts it on the table without speaking. Then he looks at Dale. "Walk me through the Grand Crypt," he says. "I walked in," Dale says. "I went to the main chamber. I sat down. It knelt. I waited 3 hours and then I told it could go." Wren looks at him for a long moment. A Class 8 Wraith-Sovereign, sealed for 4 centuries. Knelt. Yes. And then departed voluntarily. Yes. Another long moment. Wren has been directing this bureau for 9 years. He has seen a lot of field results. This is not a result that fits into the experience those 9 years gave him, and he is professional enough to know it and not to pretend otherwise. The Bureau's ranking system, he says, measuring his words, classifies hunters from Tier 1 to Tier 7. Tier 7 is our highest certified classification. There is no Tier 8, because the Bureau has never had a hunter whose sight channel exceeds those parameters. He looks at the scan report. Your resonance field covers frequencies that our research-grade equipment registers as valid signal but has no classification tier for. The designation Sovereign Void was entered into your registry by the Bureau's own system when it defaulted to that notation after exhausting its classification options. He pauses. The Bureau's ranking system has no way to classify you. Dale says nothing. The Grand Crypt has been an open case for 11 years, Wren says. Our best assessment was that clearance was not achievable. You resolved it in 4 hours, alone. He looks at Dale across the table. I need to formally ask, will you continue working with the Bureau on the remaining open cases? There it is, the thing the formal record is here to document. Director Callus Wren, who laughed first in the exam room and called Orvin in to share the joke, and sent Dale's inert printout to the intake board where it stayed for 3 months. Asking. Dale looks at the files on the table. At the 11-year Grand Crypt record, and the closed stamp on the Halvern case, and the backlog list with his anonymous tips, marked off one by one, he doesn't look at the 0. Yes, he says. The Bureau would formalize your engagement as, I'll use the portal, same as I have been. Wren absorbs this. Something in his expression shifts, not dramatically, not in a way that would be visible to someone not watching for it. But Dale is watching for it, and it is there. The recalibration. The thing that happens when a man who has been on one side of the table his entire career finds himself on the other side. The Bureau would like to formally acknowledge. The Bureau's ranking system has no classification for me, Dale says. Not unkindly. Simply, the research grade scan produced a designation because the system ran out of options. Your case files are getting closed. I'll keep closing them. He picks up his notebook. Is there anything else? Silence. Orvin Drake speaks for the first time. He has been silent for the entire meeting, in the way of a man doing the specific work of honest reassessment. He came into this meeting with the field report from the Grand Crypt verification, which he ran himself, and the scan report that he has now read 4 times, and the list of 15 case closures, and the memory, clear, professionally unflattering, of standing in the intake exam room and laughing. He is a man who became #1 at this Bureau by being genuinely good at what he does, and that includes, at cost, looking clearly at things he got wrong. He says, your intake entry is still in the public registry. I know. Status, inert. Score, 0. I know. Orvin looks at Wren, not the way a subordinate looks at a superior for direction, the way one professional looks at another when both of them have arrived at the same place. That needs to be updated, he says, based on the scan report, administratively. Agreed, Wren says. To what tier? The deputy asks. He has opened the registry system on his tablet. The tier options on the screen run from 1 to 7. The silence in the room has a particular quality. Everyone at the table is looking at the same thing, a drop-down menu that stops at 7, and a scan report on the table that has no number at the top, only a word. Unclassifiable. Update it to reflect the scan report designation. Wren says finally. Status, sovereign void. Tier, above site. Classification, unclassifiable. If the system requires a numerical tier, leave the field blank. He nods at the deputy. Do it now. On the record, the deputy types. Across the Bureau's public registry, the same one Dale's inert result has been visible on since the morning after his certification exam, the same one every agent in this building walks past. His entry updates. Name, Dale Vorn. Status, sovereign void. Site classification, above site / unclassifiable. Dale stands up. He picks up his bag. He nods to the room, not warmly, not coldly, with the same level acknowledgement he gives every fact he records, and he walks to the door. The hallway outside the conference room runs the length of the second floor and ends at the stairwell. Along it, the active case board, updated every morning. The staff board in the glass case from the Bureau's first year. The framed intake class photograph from 11 years ago that no one has taken down yet. And near the stairwell, mounted flat, a plaque. The current certification intake results for the year. 12 names, 11 scores, 1 entry at the bottom. Dale Vorn, score, 0, status, inert. He passes it on the way to the stairs. He reads it as he passes, his name, the 0 beside it, the inert below it, and he notes the facts of it the way he notes everything, which is to say completely, and without looking away from what is there, and then he is past it, and at the stairwell, and going down. Behind him, on the second floor, the conference room is still. Ren is at the table. Orvin is at the table. Neither is speaking. The plaque is on the wall with the 0 and the INERT. The registry has sovereign void, above site, unclassifiable. The active case backlog is at 13. 2 of those are the sites previously classified as non-clearable, which means they are the 2 sites the Bureau formally wrote off as unresolvable with any method currently known. He has already read both case files. He read them this morning, before the meeting, the same way he read the Grand Crypt file on the Sunday afternoon, before he walked in on Monday night. He has already mapped both sites. He knows what he will find when he enters them, because by now he understands the pattern well enough to predict it. The entities will turn, they will hold still, they will attend, and then they will do what everything does in the presence of something at the top of the scale. He walks out of the Bureau building through the main entrance and takes the transit line back to Graymore District. The afternoon light comes through the transit windows at the low angle of early autumn, and the city goes past outside the glass. The old districts and the new blocks and the spirit monitor poles on every street corner, the infrastructure of a city that has been managing what it can't fully control for as long as the Bureau has existed. He thinks about the 2 remaining non-clearable sites. He has already read both case files, read them this morning, before the meeting, the same way he read the Grand Crypt file on the Sunday afternoon, before he walked in on Monday night. He has mapped both locations from the public monitoring data. He knows what he will find when he enters them, because by now the pattern is clear enough to predict. The entities will turn, they will hold still, they will attend, and then they will do what everything does in the presence of something at the top of the scale. They will resolve, not because he forces them to, because they recognize what he is, and what he is does not coexist with resistance. The transit pulls into Graymore Station. He gets off. The late afternoon sun hits the street at an angle that makes the pavement look almost golden, and the spirit monitor pole on the corner is reading 0, which means the Graymore bleed-through sites he cleared 4 weeks ago have held. They always hold. Resolved entities don't come back. He opens his field notebook to the next blank page and starts writing. The 2 remaining case files, the site layouts, the logistics of when to go. He writes in the same hand he has used for 3 years. Neat, precise, thorough. The handwriting of someone who has always understood that the work is the work regardless of what the registry says about you. The registry now says, sovereign void / above site, unclassifiable. He keeps writing. He has work to do.